Hitting record. All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? We got another awesome episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. This week, I have Andrea Bailo of Rooted for Success. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Andrea is coming from lovely Mexico, and I'm so jealous because it is so cold right now. I got my space heater next to me. I am freezing. And for those that are new to you, can you give us a brief origin story of who you are, how you got into the cannabis industry, and then we'll segue into what you're doing today for the cannabis industry?
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm Andrea Bailo, classically trained scientist. So I went to Wayne State in Detroit and got my PhD in cancer biology. And from there, I took some time, backpacked after that. I think I've told you that story a little bit. And then from there, went into my postdoc. When I was in my postdoc is when I discovered that I needed to make more money because it was very, very cheap wages for a postdoc. And there I started working at a brewery. And the brewery is when I started exploring the concept of like chemistry and brewing. And I got an opportunity to do quality management for Maui brewing companies. So I went from cancer biology to the brewing industry, and then left Hawaii a couple years after I was there in Maui. And then I went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I was also doing beer. And then from there, that's when I got into the cannabis space. So what happened is someone had called me and said, hey, we need scientists in cannabis. Maryland's about to go into medical cannabis and we need some scientists. And I was like, sure, great, let's explore it. And I ended up getting hired by two amazing women who started a company called Chesapeake Alternatives that was shortly bought by Green Thumb Industries. And that's how I got into kind of the large multi-state operation space. So very beginning stages, we were less than 100 people. I was there for 4 years, was really running the lab in Maryland. And then the need for research and development in increasing the amount of cannabis consumption platforms or, formats that people use was necessary. And I raised my hand and built a team and built a little R&D hub in Maryland and expanded and was able to implement across all of the states. And so by the time I left, we were over 3,000 people making almost $1 billion a year. And it was very exciting times. And so tons of experience in the regulated THC side. But from there, ended up going to Open Book Extracts, which is a hemp-based company. They were making cannabinoids and also trying to expand and make different minor cannabinoid products. And so I helped them launch a new business line doing manufacturing of finished goods. And then also built out an R&D team there, brought on stability, was able to do toxicology, safety studies, and then efficacies. So did about 6 clinical trials or human, consumer insight studies. So I was really able to grab a lot of information about cannabinoids from the THC side to the CBD and all of this, the alphabet soup, as people like to refer to it these days. Long
Oh
story, but
man.
try to make it brief.
No, that was so great. I told you this the first time I heard you, and for those that don't know, I met Andrea, actually from a previous guest, Elizabeth Sage. She has a group. They have a new name, but Andrea was a guest on the group, and I listened to her speak, and I instantly felt like intoxicated listening to you, but a good type of intoxication where
Great.
the words that you were just saying were just really resonating with me, and and, you had mentioned that you had now transitioned from being in the lab doing R&D to executive coaching. I don't know if it's also life coaching as well. And I think that it's pretty common, or I don't think it's uncommon that, there's a lot of like management and leadership issues in the cannabis space. And I thought, wow, this is so great that someone who has been in the lab, someone that has a research background is now able to coach some of the leaders in our industry. And so, maybe before we jump into that, I was curious, what did you kind of see as leading the R&D teams, like, maybe some improvements or things that cannabis companies could do better from a leadership perspective? And what was the catalyst to get you into coaching and out of the lab?
hmm Yeah, I mean, so we live in an environment where cannabis is undergoing where like unique to any other industry that I know where there's limited access to capital. That's a huge barrier in the industry, and that results in stifling of innovation. Like no matter what, if you're going to spend money, you need to be paying your taxes and paying your employees. Those are usually the two key things that people need to keep sustaining themselves and their business. So with that said, if I could obviously transition in the industry to focus more on finished goods manufacturing or quality management or even analytical. I have a wide breadth of like knowledge around the cannabis industry and science as it relates to it. But ultimately, I was like, look, I'm 40 years old and I want more than that. Like, I know I'm meant to do more. And I had fortune 2 years prior to when I left Open Book to get an executive coach. And they helped me um, refocus my perceptions really of like how I viewed myself and how people viewed me. And ultimately, I like to think about my behaviors and who I am as like an art studio. And so I basically had, put up pictures of this person up when you first walk into my studio of like this executor, the girl who gets stuff done. Like I was climbing that ladder, right? Like just trying to break through. And what it was doing that for me was being the person, like I said, who gets it done no matter what. She's very direct. She's very like aggressive, assertive, like maybe words that have negative connotations, but all good things for a strong leader. The one thing that I learned was that I am a people person, love people, love growing them, love helping them. However, I wasn't showing that as a value for that's not what people were seeing. And while I thought I was, that's not what like I said, that's not how I was being perceived. So that my coach really brought out that emotional awareness in me. And so what ended up happening is like now when you walk into my studio, the people person is front and center. And that's what I wanted to focus on. When I left, I was looking at other positions and thinking about other opportunities and, was having some recruitment and just thinking about what I really wanted to do. And ultimately I kept just saying like, hey, look, I want to like grow teams. My only job in life is to give people self-esteem and help them with their personal and professional identity. And they're like, "That's great." And right, run R&D for the company, et cetera. And I was like, yeah, I think actually I need to take a step back here and focus on what it would look like. What would a world where Andrea's in it, myself, obviously, like thinking about how I can have that and still be using my science and still be using all these other skills and gifts that I have. And it led me to, hey, look, I really did love coaching. And I really just came down to me calling my coach. We hadn't been, we stopped coaching a year or whatever passed. And I just called him up and was like, hey, I just need your advice or your thoughts on how if you think I would be a good coach, if this is something I should pursue. And he gave me the vote of confidence I needed and was like, absolutely 100%, you should go. And so then the very next day I signed up for a program and was like, I'm all in. And that's what I've been focusing on for the last 3 months. And I have like 7 certifications now. So I'm like it's like my full-time job. I'm 100% all in. And it's really allowing me to explore more about myself and understand. It's really has been changing who I am. Just being a coach, it's allowing me to like show up in a different way than I did before. So I'm finding great joy from it.
Yeah, wow, there was a lot that I wanted to say while you were saying that, and so let me maybe these will be out of order, but a couple of things stood out to me. Number 1 was, you talked about being a people person, but, one of the common things that I've seen is when a male has a certain set of attributes, they may say he's assertive. If a woman has the same attributes, they'll say she's aggressive. Like also, being in the sciences, I know the sciences tend to be more male dominated. Did you feel that you needed to be like more masculine in your approach because you were around more men and that shifted like the way that you showed up in the workplace versus being more of like the people person that you said that you were or are?
Mhm. You know, it's interesting that for me, it's like you are who you hang with. And so the leaders that I was around are the people that I learned how to be a leader from. Point blank. It's like when you're a child, you think that what your parents do is all it is. You think everyone's parents do that the same, right? You don't know that someone doesn't have dinner every night or someone does and you talk about things or you don't, all the different complexities of family life. And so it's the same for my leadership experience. It was what I was exposed to. And so I was exposed to, especially not unique to cannabis, white men. And so I think I just naturally adapted to what they were doing. So often actually I had conversations with HR during my tenure in these companies and was like, hey, look, you can't do that. You can't talk to an employee this way or do X, Y, or Z. And I was like, well, why not? So and so does it. And they're the, blah, blah, blah of the company. And they're like, oh, well, they can do that, but you can't. And I was like, oh, so there's double
Wow.
standards. And so I think I recognized there was a double standard for being either less than a C-suite member or being a woman. I very much recognize like the woman versus man in the workplace. However, I think the way I always thought about it was more of like a level, more of like, oh, well, if I'm a C-suite member, then I can do that. And so as I was growing in my leadership, or as I was growing as a leader, I unfortunately had taken on some characteristics that were less than desirable and definitely weren't authentic to me. Like I said, I consider it a studio because those pictures are always there. Like Executor, the girl that gets shit done, she's still here. She's just that picture's in the back of the studio. Like you can go back there and see that person, but like that's not who I show up to be anymore. Right. That's not like the first thing you're gonna see. So um I think I answered your question, but basically it really was more of like, I just was adapting to my environment and following the leaders that I saw. And obviously there was a bunch of different leaders and different experiences. But I tended to follow the ones, that were succeeding and growing. And I had, I was one of those high achievers that wanted to like go further and I made it, right? Like that's part of my story and how I help people in my coaching practice is like, I went through four very, very big leaps in my career transition from a cancer biologist to a beer chemist, to a cannabis scientist, to an executive coach. And if we go back in time, I've been thinking about it a lot. And like, if we go back into time, all the way back, like when's the first time I can remember taking a big leap? And it's actually in 2000 and what is it, 2004. So 20 years ago when my best friend passed away. So I was 20 years old. And when she died, it was like I was going to pre-med. I had already applied to medical school. I was in secondary application phase and she died in December. And in January, I like came out of the haze of, oh my gosh, I just lost my best friend to like, I'm not going to medical school. Like I literally shifted gears with no fear and no thought and just jumped in and was like, I'm going to get my PhD because doctors tell people today what you're going to be treated with. And if someone with a PhD tells you tomorrow what you'll be treated with. So I took that as, that was like, again, I think the first time. And so that was like that pinnacle moment in my life where like I just started being like, well, we're going to do whatever I set my mind to. And then I'm just going to not let fear get in the way. And so, yeah, it kind of tangented a little bit there,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, no, I
that's
love
how I
it.
ended
I
up
love it.
here. And like, that's like what I actually like, because I've been there. That's like, again, part of what I help people with is those really critical points when you're in, we're always in the searching phase and then we're struggling and then we take a stop and then we find a solution. And so I help people through those different phases to like make a decision. And like the things we don't change are the things we choose. And so that's something I've taken, pretty seriously. Actually, my hairdresser said that to me. It's something that I'm like living by.
Yeah, I do miss going to a barber because I used to have so many awesome conversations with my barber about just life in general, and just so many nuggets of wisdom would come out while I was getting my hair cut. And once again, you packed in a lot of just really interesting information. Number one, I love it when coaches have some life experience. You said you were 40 when you jumped into it. And I don't know about you, but in a lot of my coaching training classes, I was like the oldest individual there. And I thought, wow, there's so many like 20 something coaches. Like, where's the experience going to come from to kind of add to the wisdom or add to their knowledge that they're bringing in and then turn into wisdom? So I really love that. I also love the story that you shared about your best friend passing away and that being a catalyst for change. And what I've noticed in my life, as well as my clients' life as well, is something similar, which is, yeah, all the biggest like, leaps of improvements in their life came at a time when there was like a lot of darkness or a lot of polarity or a lot of just chaos that was going on. And that's one thing that I really try to remember as, I head into chaotic times or I struggle to see, the light that's being hidden from the clouds. And I was curious, as someone that has held many positions in the cannabis industry, when you look at the leadership today, and I know this is like a very broad brush stroke, but where do you see like, the biggest challenges for the leaders in cannabis today?
I mean, without a doubt, like I said, it's the limited capital access, which also leads to price compression, squeezing profitability and stifling innovation. Straight up, like there's just no other industry where people don't have access to money. And then if you're a minority, it's even more severe. So I just finished a market research study where I've interviewed 20 different cannabis leaders, and they all said the same thing. Like I came up with some hypothesis and every single person reminded me that it's the limited capital access. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I help solve that? Well, it's really about like a lot of it is focused on strategy. Like, how do you incorporate this into your strategy as you're thinking about what you're doing and what you're going to do next? And like, if this runs dry, what do you do next? Like having 5 or 6 contingency plans for money. And what happens when, other companies are going out of business? This is where the price compression comes in. So companies are going out of business and then they start dumping their products into the market, which makes you have to drop your prices because they're just really looking for top line results. And top line results, for those who don't know, is just looking for revenue and increasing gross sales. So that's not thinking about profitability and all the other things that you need to think about when you're running a successful business. And so the companies that are focusing on profitability are having to lose margin. Their businesses are suffering. It's like a terrible situation. And these people I interviewed were everything from people making $100,000 a year in revenue to $1 billion in revenue. And they were people that were podcasters, people who are educators, policymakers. They were multi-state operators. They were brand founders or owners. And so, single dispensary owners, like multi-dispensary owners, manufacturers. It was a huge range of people providing technology. So I wanted to touch everything, right? From the beginning or from from the bottom of the food chain to the top and see what the problems were. And that's the one always, every single time. And of course, after that is also brought up like the inconsistency and the regulatory frameworks. And not only that, but then the bureaucratic barriers to actually implement the policies that they make. And then this huge market fragmentation. Like, do we need to not talk about THC and like how they haven't come together? And I've been picking people's brains now where it's like, is there any group where people are coming together? And I think that's where, if nothing else comes from this market research, hopefully like people find some interest in the fact that I understand their problems. But more so is like, can I create some type of unification amongst these groups? And that's something that I'll be producing like a paper about this. So I'll be sharing that my LinkedIn and other places. So hopefully at the end of the day, I can get groups to unify, because if we don't, then we're not going to create any type of regulatory, like what is the government supposed to do? What's the Trump administration going to do unless someone comes in, not these groups with different priorities? Like we need to come together and find common ground and be able to create change and move forward, which is actually kind of interesting that I just said that, because that is literally how I coach. Like, how do we leverage each other and how do we find common ground with people, especially if we're doing like conflict management? And how do we move forward? Like, that's the point of coaching, moving forward. Keep taking one little step each day, keep going, reach your goal. So that's what the whole cannabis industry needs to do. They need to come together and move ourselves forward.
Yeah. I think the first ARC View that I went to was in 2013. And I remember, I don't know, I don't want to say it was like a Howard Johnson motel, but it was a very, very modest meeting facility. And then a couple of years later, we're like in these big conference halls. And, the level of business acumen and the people from the first one, like in 2013 to like, let's say 2015, there was like a huge jump, in 2015, everyone was like, in 2013, people were like in hoodies and stuff like that. In 2015, everyone just like came in suits. And I saw a lot of the people that I knew from the tech industry there. And I thought, oh man, I don't know if this is like a good or a bad thing, but having been in tech for the first half of my career and looking at the business models of top line revenue growth, market share, acquisition, and then EBITDA or profitability being like not a very important KPI for investors to keep investing. I just thought, man, this might not be the right model for cannabis, but hey, what do I know? It's a brand new model. And I have a lot of empathy for people that ran businesses with this model, thinking that they could burn money for a while and then eventually be one of the last people standing. And then ultimately that blowing up in their faces. And I do believe that this was required for people to start thinking about business models where you could be profitable today, versus thinking that you could just play the race to zero,
Mhm.
force everyone to get their pricing down and realize, oh, wait, unlike software where you could just provision new seats with the push of a button, people actually have to grow this stuff, grow it well, process it well, test it well, and do all of these things. So in many ways, like I do feel like, I mean, let's just say this way. I would say 95% of the companies I started off with in 2014, none of them are here. So I've seen like a lot of people lose their life savings, lose their familial relationships, their friendships over this. But I also believe that as a nascent industry, this was part of the learning curve of like really understanding like what does it take to run a profitable business in this space. And unfortunately, a lot of people, including myself, had to shut down businesses. And so maybe where I would like to ask you a deeper question is, do you think like the lack of capital then puts people into a place of fear and scarcity? When they are in a place of fear and scarcity, they cannot tap into their higher minds, and then they end up making even worse decisions after that.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'm hoping to help people with is like, we have to, that's like incremental steps. Like, we're going to have to make some changes here. And if it's not in the strategy that you already built, like, let's either build a new one or let's start thinking about how you make decisions. And so doing that risk assessment, right? Because no matter what at this point, like, you're barely surviving. Like, that's my thing is like, lead the industry, don't just survive. That's what I'm really trying to help people do. Like, thrive. Like, let's get there. And it really, like you just said, yes. And so it's really, yeah, like coming down to making decisions. Like, not only are people going through analysis paralysis and can't make a decision, they often are also just saying, "Hey, I don't like this. This one's too hard, so we're just not going to do it." But that might be the right one to make. So you really have to sit down and assess every risk that you're thinking about taking. Know that no matter what, you're going to take a risk. So let's get comfortable being uncomfortable, and let's like do the due diligence to research and understand what decision we're going to make and what risk we're about to take, and take one. Like, you're going to have to at this point, right? And if you think you're going to come in this industry as a new person, which I know people still are, and you think that you're just going to roll in and like start printing money, like, those days are far behind us, my friends. That is far behind us.
Yeah. I love that. I love two things that you said. Number one, we're not here to just survive. We're here to thrive. I 100% believe that. The other one was let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I
Hmm.
know that for myself, being an optimist, when I would feel discomfort, I would just try to think about, oh, what could this be? And just really avoid like looking at, the dirty laundry that I had to take care of. So I really appreciated you bringing that up. And, one of the things that you brought up that I don't wanna gloss over is you said you got 7 certifications. Can you tell us what
I
those 7 are?
Okay, let's see. So, I got my executive coaching, and then I have communication impact, strategic planning, powered influence. I think I need to like pull them up. Powered influence, culture change. Um, yeah, I need to pull them up. Culture change, powered influence. Oh, perceptual coaching. And then I'm missing one, which might be like career development or so, I think along that line. It's right. It's funny because you're like, oh, and then the next one I'm going to get, which is the one I'll shout from the rooftops, is that I will be getting a specialty certification in coaching in cannabis, and that's going to be due to the fact that I did this study, and I'm going to be, putting a lot. I've already put a ton of energy and time into it to understand what challenges are facing, and then the goal here is to create tailored solutions. Obviously, everybody's situation is unique, but at the same time, everyone's problems are the same. So, like, it's really like about it's figuring out how to attack those problems and then adapting them to each individual specific style and desires and outcomes. Because that's what it's all about. Like, everybody's going to have a different outcome and goal, and my job is just to really help get them there and not lead them down a path they don't want to go, right, and follow them.
Wow. Well, I definitely look at it as a positive where my coach has so many certifications that she can't even remember all of them. And I also love that you have I don't know if I heard you correctly or if I'm interpreting this correctly, but because of the paper you wrote, a new certification just kind of was created. So in many ways, it's like getting into coaching allowed you to be a trailblazer in cannabis and creating a cannabis coaching certification as well.
Yep. Yep. No, and so I have some vision, like, and let me tell you this, actually, it's interesting. I have a vision of how I want it to look. But at the same time, due to the fact that I know the challenges in the cannabis industry, I'm hesitant to do it. Because if I start labeling myself as someone who focuses on cannabis, I'm going to start hurting myself. Like, another thing that people at the more low end of the food chain mention is payment processing. So payment processing, they are, and you might know, I don't know, Seibo, if you know about this, but like, payment processing like Stripe and other companies will not work with you if you are
Yep.
getting money from a cannabis company. So I was like, I'm not planning on producing anything that I'm going to be selling that I need, a payment processor for, but it does make me rethink how I'm going to brand myself and how I'm going to market myself. Because is it really worth bringing that attention to myself? Like, do I keep it less, keep the cannabis away, but people know on LinkedIn maybe that's what I do, but my website is going to look a little different. It's interesting, right? Like, there's, this discrimination against the industry and the stigma is still there that people, and it's really, due to the legality of it. But like, that's like making me rethink even how I want to start a business in this space.
Yeah. My unsolicited feedback on that is
Mhm.
you're skilled enough, you're bright enough, you bring enough to the table, they'll figure out how to pay you, regardless if
There you
it's
go.
Stripe or ACH or Wire. That's the level of confidence that I have in you. And it's very rare where I feel like I respect everyone that I speak to, but with you, there's just this almost like level of, I don't wanna say intimidation because I don't wanna make it seem like you're not friendly, but you're just so bright, you're just so articulate, you're very lucid, and what I really love about speaking with you is, like, when I'm speaking with you, I know that you're giving me 100% of your attention. I hope you could feel I'm giving you 100% of mine, and, like, this energy exchange to me is just very palpable. And so everything that you're saying, I'm just really receiving. And I just wanted to really reflect that back to you because, you know, and for those that don't know, I just saw Andrea speak. I reached out to her. We had a talk. And then I was like, I need to have you on the podcast because my 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 nightmare is that we're just going to fuck up the cannabis industry and it's not going to be what it could be. And when I see someone like you, Andrea, I believe that you could provide the feedback to the leaders in this industry and help guide them to make smarter decisions, not just for themselves, not just for their companies, but for the industry as a whole. And I believe that if we can all not just say co-opetition and rising tides raise all boats, but really like live that, like the hemp and the cannabis side of things, right? Like we talked about like that elephant in the room. If they were trying to help each other, like how much further would we be than if we were attacking each other?
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's interesting because people say, like, oh no, like we do buy hemp products and we sell hemp products. And it's like, oh, because you had to. That's again wasn't part of the strategy, but like you felt like you had to because I just said the other day, like you can go buy an intoxicating cannabinoid. You can go pick one up just like you can pick up a pack of gum right now. So, like, of course, you're going to compete in that market. But that's not what I'm talking about. Is I'm not talking about supporting each other, like by, patronizing each other, or is that the right word? Yeah, like by being patrons for each other. I'm talking about it from like, let's really get together and like come and figure out how we can move this industry forward together and put our differences aside. Cause obviously, like when you start, even like if that's what coaching is too, like when I'm talking to someone, when you start drilling into the head and start pulling stuff out and finding common ground, you can really, really find like, wow, we actually do have a lot in common. And here's how we can make this work. Like, I know if they got into a room together and I'm saying who I say they, like we know who they are. I'm going to tangent just a little bit because that's one of the concerns too is like what's going to end up happening. And it is going to be these multi-state operators and the big companies that are going to lead everything because everyone else, like you said, doesn't even exist since 2015. So like people are just going to start the industry shrinking and then it's just going to be what the top 5 to 10 companies running everything. Maybe that's when we'll see federal change. Is that what it's going to take? I would like to see it not go that way because this is a business for the people. Like this was an opportunity for my neighbor and your neighbor and my aunt and, to get involved and to start a business. And they're making that more and more difficult every day. It's like just going to become another large, top organization in the world. Like someone's going to, big tobacco or alcohol. I mean, they already have their hands all over it. Like is someone just going to take it over and it's going to be completely out of the people's hands and there'll be no opportunity to create in the space and be innovative and have your grow in your community. Like it, it's scary to think about, or it's disappointing to think about. What opportunities were here and what won't be if we don't do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this might be a nice segue into something we spoke about right before we hit the record button. You had said, "Hey, Seibo, is it okay to talk about some of the meditation and things of that nature?" And I would say meditation, cannabis used to be like the number one thing that anytime someone came over, I would be educating them on cannabis. But now when people come over, I'm always asking them, do you meditate? So I'm curious, what does meditation mean to you and how has it impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this because after our first conversation, like I said, I was like, "Oh, I'm very different than Seibo." Like, I am very connected to the earth. I'm very grounded, but I'm also like not someone who meditates. And so what I found as of late, and I wanted to definitely talk to you about, and you just mentioned it earlier, where you're like, hey, it's like how engaged I am with people, you mentioned. And thank you for saying that because I am. And how engaged you are with me and listening to me, I feel it as well. And like energy vibe that we're both that you feel is equal to mine. So I was very happy to talk with you today and do this. So what I've noticed is during my coaching, in something, it's been, like I said, it's making me very happy. It's changing me in a way that I didn't expect. And I'll go through this a little bit. So when I'm coaching, I'm so engaged and so present and so curious and just listening to the person that it's engaging me in a different way that I've never been. And so it's starting to like, it's like manifesting as like significantly happier. Like I'm finding myself like I take half an hour breaks between every coaching session. And like I always take a walk during those. So it's like increasing my activity in general. And like the nicest thing about it is like I'm so into it. I'm so there. It's like, is this what meditation is? Like, is this what people feel? Cause like what's happening is I'm not thinking about myself anymore. And so, like, as you can tell, I'm very energetic. I'm very high, I'm moving. My flywheel is going all day long. And like when I start coaching, it stops. Like it's not stopping. So I'm like, my brain's still engaged. So I'm listening and I'm with someone, but I'm not thinking when they say something, I'm not like, oh, how does this relate to my business? I should jot that down. Like I might want, like my head doesn't even go there. I'm just there and I'm not. And so I'm like, it's resulting in like this really like, I'm doing this, 5 hours a day, 3 days a week and I'm like, whoa, I think I'm like just happier. I'm sleeping better. And then there's this other part, stay with me, is like, I started thinking about it because, of course, I'm a scientist. So I started thinking about it from like the brain standpoint, like what's happening here. And I was like, okay, I think there's like system one and system two of like thinking. And I analogize that to like listening. So like there's like the system one is like long-term memory. So you're like quick processing. So let me give you an example. Let's start here. So if I were to say to you, okay, you go into a toy store, and there's a toy bat and there's a toy ball. Together, they cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. So how much is the ball?
10 cents?
That's wrong. So that's the like long-term memory quick processing, because if it's $1 more than the ball and it costs $1.10, the ball has to cost 5 cents, because if it's $1 more, then it's $1.05 for the bat.
Oh, I knew it was a trick question, but I
It
wanted to
is.
answer quickly.
I know, but no, that's because you didn't have to, but that's what people do. So this is like based off of like, there's a guy who talks about it in a podcast or like a I don't know, like, YouTube channel, but it's based off this guy, Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And I'll get back to this. It's all is connected, I promise. So
Yes.
when he talks about it, it's like, so you have the long-term quick, fast thinking. We can call that person like, it's nice to use analogies. So that's like Jack doing the work, right? And that's the fast one, like, hey, solving problems quick. And then there's Jill, who's like the working memory. And that's the person that has to solve problems. It can only do like 4 or 5 steps at a time. So like when you're a kid and you're tying your shoes, you like sing a rhyme because there's too many steps to remember. So our brains have to do something to help us think about the process. And so how this relates, and I thought about this for coaching, I was like, so I think what's happening is I'm used to like at work, my last job, I'd work whatever, 70 hours a week, no problem, crushing, thinking, going. But it was all like stuff I knew how to do, like answer a call, have a conversation, get on a chat. Like, obviously there was some deep thinking for like the science side, but most of my time was spent with my like system one and just like quick thinking and moving and going. And then now I'm sitting here using system two for what I say, 5 hours a day, 3 days a week, 15 hours a week. And that is resulting in something where I'm like, oh, it's engaging my brain in this different way. I'm feeling like I'm in a meditative state. Like I feel so calm. I feel nothing that a client says to me goes to bed with me. Like it's amazing. I dream all the time and I never dream about a client. I never dream about their problems. It's like I'm so there with them and I want them. I'm so attached to them, not attached. I'm so committed to them achieving their goals, but I'm not committed to them, to the goal. Like it's not my problem. Like once I leave, I'm like, okay, now on to the next thing that I'm doing. And I helped them get to their goal. Now they have to go do that. And that's on them. And so again, bringing this back, it's like, there's Like, even like, I don't know, it's like even, when your brain is doing that too, and it starts using system 2 more, it actually consumes more calories as well. And I was like, "Oh, I just noticed," I was like, "Oh, I've been like losing weight." And I usually have to like try something, like do something to like initiate a weight loss. And I was like, wow, this is like just happening. I was like, I wonder if it's because my brain is consuming more calories. I'm taking obviously a little more walks because I'm like needing to take a break after like the intensity of what I just did, even though I'm doing nothing but listening. Point of the story, I've never listened so intensely in my life, and I don't think I ever understood what active listening was until I really did this. Because again, I'm not thinking, but I am thinking, and it's like it's so calming. I don't even know. It's this whole new world for me, and I can't decide if, like, eventually, like, what ends up happening, right, is once you learn how to tie your shoes, it becomes muscle memory. So you're like, "Okay, now I don't have to think about that anymore." And I don't think that's gonna happen in coaching because every person is new and they're gonna present new stuff. So I feel like there'll never be a chance for me to, like, not be in that that system 2 thinking for an hour at a time, 5 days, 15 times a week. And it's a totally different world. So that was my thought on meditation and like where I'm at now. It's like, I don't know. I told you I'm not like, I don't know how to meditate. So I don't know if this is what people might describe, like is the feeling or how they might scientifically explain it.
I would say absolutely, and since you're a scientist, I love that too because we could go into some of the science, but the way that I received what you were saying is that, um well, number 1 is I read that your brain could use anywhere from 20% up to 40% of all the ATP that your mitochondria is producing, so absolutely, like, heavy thinking will burn a lot of calories. Number 2 is you were talking about yeah, previously, you would when someone's talking to you, you might make, like, little data points of, "Oh, they said this," just make a little marker, and then they said that and apply it to the business, and then after listening, you respond to them, but now you're just kind of there with them. And I really love that because I have a formula for how to connect with people. And that formula is spending time with them with no ulterior motive. So when I'm listening to you, I'm not there to confirm. I'm not there to be a contrarian. I'm just there to listen. And as a coach, I used to do the same thing was when people would tell me their problems, I'd be like, all right, problem number 1, problem number 2, problem number 3. So as I'm listening, I'm like building a notebook in my head of like how to respond. And what I realized was it was taking me out of the present moment, seeing the micro expressions change or the posture change. And so what I learned was, okay, if I could just listen and just not try to affirm or deny whatever they're saying and just listen. Whatever's going to come out next is going to be the right thing because I was fully present with them and absorbing everything from their words, their energy to their physical and facial expression. So I really loved you saying that. And 100%, there are so many ways to tap into what I like to call theta consciousness. You can be gardening, you can be listening to someone, I get into it doing jujitsu. It's hard to think about stuff when someone else is trying to choke you to death? And so absolutely, I believe that there's so many ways to tap into, I'd like to just call it the higher mind, where you have more access to your own inner brilliance, your own inner wisdom. And so I can, with both my spiritual side and scientific side, absolutely confirm what you're doing is more meditating and your clients are going to benefit from it. And for me, I think what really I was impressed with the way that you could articulate yourself. You're very fast, you're very articulate, but it was beyond that. It was something that was transcendent of just the words that made me want to reach out, which is I could really feel the connection. I could see that this wasn't like, okay, I tried a whole bunch of other things. I'm going to be a coach now. This is like, no, I benefited from coaching the stuff that I'm learning, I could teach other people. And I really do feel a service to others energy from you as opposed to I'm going to be like the next Tony Robbins and wow, look at me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is all about, I mean, I think the most one thing I've determined is actually the most important thing in my life is it the most, I would hate to be quoted as that. It is really important to me though, like why what I decided what I'm gonna do with my life is I just want to have control over how I spend my time. Like, that's it. I just wanna be and if I wanna work 80 hours a week and I wanna work at a corporate job, then so be it. If I whatever I wanna do, I just wanna be in charge of how it's gonna be. And so if I wanna spend that's where I'm like, if I wanna work from X to X time, my call. And so, that's where I think there was a lot of, that was like a realization I had after I, decided to start doing this. It's like, that's the greatest joy I have is like being able to be in charge of how I spend my time and who I spend my time with. Because like even I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, like, right? You just said like I'm energetic, I'm pretty direct, and like the way I coach too, like I'm an action forward coach. So like a lot of people like to, we probably have different styles. Like I tend to keep people on track with what their goals are. If they go astray, I ask them, hey, I see you're going astray. Do you want to get back to where we were in the beginning or do you want to go this way? And like I call that out, right? So I keep them like, but that's like my style. I'm like, let's wait. Come on, goals, let's go. Like the executor, she's still there, but like I'm also still listening to you. So tell me what you want and let's go.
Yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. For those that don't know, like my clientele is about 95% women, and it's more about helping them unwind and get into the anti-hustle mode and be more of themselves, not what they think society wants from them. But you know, that aside, one of the things that you said that really stood out to me was you talked about like the reason why you wanted to do this was to be able to have the time to do what you wanted to do. Now, I would say one of the biggest limiting beliefs and why I want to ask you is you are a very action oriented person. And I feel like a lot of times on my podcast, we talk about like these high level ideological ideas and then the tactical things of like how to get there kind of get lost. It's just like, wow, great idea. Well, how do we friggin' do that? So I would say the number one thing or one of the most common things I get is like, well, Sabo, you could do that, or Andrea could do that and just quit your jobs, but I can't do that. I have XYZ or I have these responsibilities. When you bump into someone with limiting beliefs like that, what do you do to help them kind of open up this belief system to really believe that they can do whatever that they want to do?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. How do I get someone out of a limiting belief? I mean, the first thing I do honestly is like it depends. Each person is different because I am aware and like understand how it'll feel for someone based on working with them. But typically I just call it out and I say, hey, like I hear that and you said this and like that so that has the potential to be a limiting belief. What do you think? And then typically they'll be like, oh, well, and then we can decide right then, like, do you want to talk about that or do you want to keep going with like what you're saying? Like, oh, I want to keep going. This actually happened last night. They're like, no, let's just keep going. I was like, okay, put a pin in it. And then we kept talking and talking. We closed the session. And then at the end, I was like, all right, how do you want to close? And they're like, oh, this, that. And I was like, where do you want to start next time? They said, I want to start with the pin we just put in there. Like, so I was like, okay, so how I'm going to approach that is it's basically like, hey, well, what would it look like if it wasn't this way? I mean, that's the most basic way to ask, right? Like, what would it look like if that weren't true? Tell me a world. Like, I like to invite people into a world. Like, kind of just rolled my eyes because I get cheesed out by myself sometimes where I'm like, come into this fantasy world with me. Do you want to come? Like, first invite, right? Do you want to be there with me? Let's go. Tell me what it looks like now that that's not true. And so I just really try to get them to just see another side of it. Like, what could it look like? What would it be? What would be possible now? And then if they realize, then they start talking about it. And then I just can be like, hey, so like, well, how can you make that a reality? Or is that something, how can you make it a reality or how do you want it to be now? And then they might be like, maybe I can like start thinking about it, differently or, they might come up with their own way. It's hard to keep going after that because I have to just follow, right? But that's like the general path I think I take typically when someone has a limiting belief or a perception that because some perceptions are fine. That's all they are. That's all I'm doing here. This is my world. This is Andrew's world. I created it. And like, this is what I live in. And like, here's the things that happened and here's why they happened. And I'm just making it. And then there's, like I said, the perceptions are fine. It's just a matter of if they're limiting you from reaching your goals and your full potential. And that's where we really like, so I wouldn't just call out any perception, right? Um, and in fact, I think you know this, but I'm writing a book, right? And that's the first thing I started when I quit my job was I'm writing a book about the power of perception. It is not for leaders. It is for anybody who has a problem to solve. And it's really just like, again, some of that like more sciencey stuff, like the psychology of thinking and like making decisions. Like there's the rule-based thinking system, and then there's the ration, the associative, where it's like your brain's gonna work in different ways. And so I kind of just like explain that a little bit and like a lot of real world examples of like how I experienced like, people's intentions, like being responsive versus reactive. And active listening and decision making and judgments. And that's what's fun about coaching. I'm going in circles here, but the fun thing about coaching and my favorite thing is like I get to reserve all judgment. And that's why it's such a great, like, I don't, in a positive or a negative way, right? Like, I'm not telling you, like, that's great, go for it, do that. I'm not also not like, terrible idea, don't do that. I just listen. I don't have to judge them. And I think that's why it's so relieving and so meditative, where it's like, I don't even have to, like, this is you. And I'm your interactive journal. Like, you're going to write something down, you're going to say it out loud here, and then I'm going to reflect it back or ask you a question. And like anything you say here is all you. Like, I'm not going to say, I'm not here to judge you. It's great.
Yeah, totally, totally. You're not there to judge them, but you did judge yourself for giving yourself a eye roll. I was curious, why did you even call that out?
You know what? That's okay. So you're coaching me here. All right.
Just asking a question.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I think because I have perceptions. Um, I don't remember what I rolled my eye about. But that was part of it about, because you had mentioned too, you were
You
like,
were like, you were inviting someone
oh,
into,
into the
like, this
fantasy
scenario.
world.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's fun. It's kinda like, come into this fantasy, it's kind of like it's kinda silly, so I think that's why I rolled my eyes. Because I think I don't love that, but I also realize it's a great way to invite someone, and it's interesting because I've practiced it, like, 4 times, inviting someone into a space and, like, a fantasy world where the things that you say now are not the way they are, and, like, tell me how it is when it's not that way. Nobody can do it. They always go to the past, like, "Well, this wouldn't happen though because X," and I can't stop them from saying that, so I'm like, "Okay, you're not ready to, like, you're not, this isn't the right question." Or I actually, someone gave me advice afterwards. It's just my sister, I don't mind saying. And she was like, "Look, I think once you ask me the second time, then I could go there." So it's almost like you need the invitation twice to really be like, okay, like, what would it really look like? So it's a training process with the person too, like, when you're coaching them, like, they don't really know what to expect, and you kinda gotta be like, they don't realize they can go there, and, like, "It's a safe place here with me, like, we can go wherever you want, and, like, we can talk about something that could never happen, but once you do, like, is there a way to make it happen? Like, let's look at that," you know? So, I think I rolled my eyes, again, I'm going back to the question because it just seems like a silly way to get someone into that space.
I actually asked you that question because I would do the same thing for a lot of the things that I said. Previous to us meeting, the previous version of me that was building medical cannabis vaporizers was all about the flavonoids, the terpenes, the cannabinoids, the biochemistry. So there was a very scientific approach that I had, or at least the way that I presented myself. And then all of a sudden, after taking a 3-year break on LinkedIn and showing up in the cannabis industry, and I'm talking about energy and vibrations and stuff, I was just like, holy crap, like this is even harder than coming out of the green closet, coming out of the spiritual closet. Cause I believe that if I expose that side of me, a lot of like my credibility would disappear. And what I ended up realizing was you can't accomplish anything unless you could see it first. And I believe that this exercise of bringing someone into this visualization exercise of how might it look like if you didn't have this limiting belief, this really is the catalyst to really opening up like the mind's eye to like, wow, this is a possibility. And as your sister said, maybe the first time you ask, it's not quite ready to open up yet. But by the second time, it's like, okay, hey, I could kind of see like a little glimmer of light. And maybe there's this possibility that I could do what Andrea is telling me that I could potentially do. And the other thing that I really loved is that you were talking about I could just show up without judgment. And to me, I would say one of the best lessons that I learned was, hey, how come I could hold space for all of my clients without judging them? But when I go look in the mirror, I'm
Mm.
super judgy. And so I started really learning like, wow, every time I'm coaching someone, it's giving me more insight into my own self. Cause I don't wanna say you're similar, but I could tell that you have a very fast processor in your brain, so if you're anything like me, it's probably easy to, like, read new information, absorb it. I could talk about it to people and maybe even seem like I know what I'm talking about, but am I actually practicing that? Did I integrate that? Is that a part of my firmware, or is this just like is it in the application layer that I have to push on that app to access it, or is it really a part of me? And that's what was really coming to me as you were saying this, and why I was smiling so much as you were explaining your ideas around meditation, listening, and what you were going through.
Yeah. Well, so Seibo, do you actively have a coach right now? Like, do you see a coach?
Yeah, I always have a coach of some
Okay.
type.
Right. 'Cause I think that's the key too, like, actually and they said that in the very beginning in my program, it was like, "The best coach has a coach." And so, right now, like, I've been doing a lot of barter coaching, right, with people to, like, get experience, and so I feel like I get a lot of opportunity to practice what I preach because I am, like, always I mean, multiple times a day, also still, like, working on myself and, like, trying to figure out what's inside my brain, and so, um but you're right, I need to, like yeah. Mirrors what is Elizabeth actually always she keeps saying this, she said this thing, like, mirrors are our triggers. And so, because like, what you see, right, triggers you. Um, anyways, I don't know where I was gonna go with that, but I need to give myself a little bit of a break there. It's not I need to not roll my eyes. That's good. That's a good takeaway,
Yeah.
good insight from today.
Well, I know from personal experience, like, I may not roll my eyes physically, but I know in my mind sometimes when I'm like, "Yeah, just raise your vibe," there's a part of me that's just like, "I can't believe you just said that." But, one of the things that I wanted to bring up before, we only have like 10, 15 more minutes here, and man, time always just flies by so quick. I'm like, maybe I gotta make these things longer." But what you said that really resonated with me was, um, what was it? Okay, so it was we were talking about the judgment, then we were talking about the eye rolling. Oh, yeah, I remember now. So, I think a lot of people have I don't know what idea they have of coaching, but a lot of my clients go, "I didn't know coaching was like this." So, I know there's a lot of people that would really benefit from your coaching. What are some telltale signs that maybe they should reach out for a coach?
That's a good question. A telltale sign that you need a coach is, because like, typically what's happening is, like, we're always in a search phase. So we're, like, learning, we're thinking, like, whether you think so or not, like, you're consciously and unconsciously learning and gathering. I think it's when you're in the struggle phase, when you start realizing, like, before you get to the deep, dark spot because, you don't wanna live I mean, people live in the struggle phase longer than they do anywhere else, and, like, until they get to that stop where they're like, "I'm going to make a pivot. I'm going to change." Like, that's when I think it makes the most I mean, it makes the most sense to come at any point, but, like, when you're in that struggle, like, don't stay there for too long. Like, get out. Like, because what I'm finding too is when I'm coaching people, oftentimes it's just I'm just someone to, like, to listen to them, right? They just need to talk it out because think and you think and you think and you're like, "I've got this all in my head." And then when you actually try to say it to someone else, you realize like, "Oh, this isn't making sense anymore." And so that's where it's like, just talk to someone. I mean, you don't wanna, like, right it's hard, like, that's why it's not a therapy, right? Like, this is definitely huge, huge line from therapy. I'll call timeout on all day on that. But it's like, why sit here and struggle when you could talk to someone about what you're struggling through, and you're gonna get to that point where you stop and make a change faster. So, like, just don't live in the dark and in the frustration and, like, when you're burning out and, like, you see all the things and, like, I always say, I'm like, "My client is the typical person has don't it doesn't even have time to set up a discovery call with me. Like, I'm too busy, can't do." That's the 7th one, time and productivity coach.
I love it. Yeah, when
Got
people
it.
tell me when people tell me, "I don't have the time to meditate for an hour a day," I go, "Well, that means you have to meditate for 2." And then you'll see how much time you have if you sit for 120 minutes, and, for me, I understand this, like, sitting in, like, that suffering and silence, and, this is I wanna empower any if this seems like something that you might wanna look into it, like, I'm not an active coach right now, that's why I have Andrea on here, and even if I was, I would still be recommending people to you because we have vastly different styles, and I always say that, like, it's one of the things that when I used to coach mostly male clients, they're like, "My company needs to see me, like, brave. My company needs to see me optimistic. My family needs to" I'm like, no, what your family needs to see is you being you. And it is much more courageous to ask for help than it is to worry about what other people would think if you're asking for help. So I really hope that people resonate with what you're saying, with what I'm saying. And if you're thinking that you potentially might need a coach, or if you're thinking, especially, I don't have time to even do a discovery call, you are swimming in a world that you imagined in your head where you don't have the time to do these things. And what I could tell you is there has not been one person that I've coached where I haven't been able to find multiple hours in their day that I could give back to them so that they could take care of themselves and really focus on growing themselves. My coach told me, Seibo, the most selfless thing you could do is to focus on yourself. 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a guy. I said, "What do you think would be the best way to heal the world?" He goes, "Yeah, heal yourself. If you heal yourself, that's the one thing that you have control over." And I believe that you can really enable people to give themselves permission to focus on themselves. Now, here's the bonus question that we're going to leave people off on. I like your response. The bonus question is, all right, Andrea, cannabis industry coaching, it could be within this or it could be totally out of this context. What is most exciting for you and what do you want to communicate to the world?
The most exciting thing about coaching to me is, again, it's owning, it's that you just said it, staying within what you can control and letting go of the rest. Like if you can do that, life will get so much easier. And it makes me so exciting to be able to pass that on to people and to remember that and live by that. And if I can just help everyone stay focused on, it's not about you, it's not about them, it's not about that. It's just about you and how you're receiving it and what you're saying it means. Like just stop creating, or well, not stop. Keep creating the stories in your head. Just decide, make good decisions or on the story that you want to make. Like it's all in your head. It's all what you're creating.
Yeah. What I got out of that is you're the author of your own book. You could write a romance novel or you could write a horror novel. It's up to you.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So for the people that are curious about what we've been talking about and want to go deeper, how do they find you?
The best way to find me right now would be on LinkedIn. So it's just Andrea Bailo. I have a pretty unique name, Billo. So it's not too hard to find me. I'll have a website up and running next year, but that is like lower priority. I just wanna coach. I wanna get with people. I wanna connect with people. I wanna help them get to their outcomes, hit their goals, set goals, whatever it is. I wanna help you get there. So that's what I'm focusing on, and everything else is just gonna happen as it happens.
Yeah, and I'll put all those links in the show notes. And, really quickly, I think that one thing I want to clarify for people before we jump off is I think when you're an executive coach, people think, oh, I need to be an executive to get a coach. Can you talk about like the types of people that you coach?
Yeah, I mean, no, so, like, it's I help all different types of people right now. I have someone who is a manager. It's really people anyone who's really just trying to make a change or really just wants to, like, needs help making whatever goal they have. It doesn't matter. It's just that I just follow a process, and I have more training and more toolkits that are targeted towards executives, but that's all, you can imagine what I've done in science. Like, I just take what I've learned and adapt it to anybody. I could You don't think you should coach a 10-year-old, but you probably could try, like, any problem that someone's having. So I don't think it's, typically it is emerging leaders and, executives, but that's not that's I don't limit myself to that. So, anybody, right, in any situation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the audience knew like they didn't have to be an executive to
Oh,
leverage your coaching. And for me, I feel like have such a multidimensional skill set that, yeah, you come for the executive coaching and you're going to get so much more out of it than just improving your business. And I really appreciate you coming on here, sharing your knowledge with the audience. And I'm glad that we got to meet and I get to be part of this journey of seeing you as a coaching leader in our space, helping our leaders become better leaders. So thank you very much, Andrea, for joining the show.
thank you so much. I had such a great time.
All right, everyone. If you enjoyed this, go follow Andrea on LinkedIn. If you like this podcast and you think someone could benefit from it, please share it with them. If you have any comments, constructive feedback, I'm always open to listening. So drop them in the comments below. And we'll be back next week with another awesome show. Thank you again, Andrea.
Bye-bye.